I'm Tim Churchill from Tim Talk, and today I'm with John Kingston, who is the Republican candidate seeking election for the U.S. Senate. The seat is currently held by Democrat Elizabeth Warren. Currently, there's not an election date. Mr. Kingston, thanks for being here.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I just, before I get going, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be in the WBCAT studio for my first live interview. So thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here with you. And I come from a very small town in central Connecticut. It's a town that is almost exactly the same size as West Bridgewater. At least the high school size is the same size as West Bridgewater. It felt we didn't have a beautiful high school like this one. Of course, I know this is a new facility for you guys, but. Yeah. Real small town living. You know, when you grew up in a small town 45 years ago in Connecticut, sort of in the backwoods in the country of a sort. You know, we didn't have a grocery store. We didn't have any fast food places. We had a country store back then. You know, and so my parents, you know, were terrific influences on us. My dad was a public school teacher, and my mom stayed at home with us. My dad had left the Army, although he stayed still in the Army Reserve. He retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. And, you know, it was a life that was dominated by sports. I just loved to play sports all the time. That's what I cared about. That's what my passions were. Turns out I was not quite as good at sports as I would have liked to have been. I was able to play through high school and some into college, but it turned out I was pretty good at school, even though I wasn't focusing on it too much. So I came out of that small town and went to Philadelphia to go to the University of Pennsylvania, where I met my now wife as a freshman, and then along the way, after a few years in Philadelphia, came to Massachusetts to go to Harvard Law School, and that's how I ended up, you know, here in Massachusetts. My dad and my granddad had been born and raised here in Massachusetts, so my dad always brought us here to Red Sox games. We didn't get to Celtics games or Patriots games when we were growing up, but we'd come back to Red Sox games, come to town, and invariably would go, I suspect, like parents do every place, you take your kids to the places that you grew up, and my dad would take me back to the old neighborhood that he grew up in, Watertown, and take me to the old neighborhood where his dad had grown up in Everett. So when I came here to Harvard Law School, it felt like it was, you know, a return to some place where my roots were, even though I hadn't actually lived in Boston. And you know, my wife and I ended up deciding that this is the place that would make our home. We've now been living here for 26 years with 4 children, aged 15 to 24, and that's what brings me here.
It's nice. Can you tell us a little bit about the responsibilities of a U.S. Senator?
We're going to the big ball questions here. I like that. The Senate's known as the greatest deliberative body in the world, you know, unfortunately, you know, that leadership mantle, which is to be assumed by senators, is something which our senators these days don't seem to be, you know, taking their responsibilities the right way. Nothing's getting done. You know, since this great American democratic experiment was launched 241 years ago, you know, the Senate was the place where the great ideas about how to run this country were debated. Famously, you know, the way that the founders set it up, the House of Representatives was supposed to be some place where things would bubble to the surface quickly and maybe that advance things quickly. The Senate were supposed to be the brakes on the system, you know, that, you know, long-standing traditions where you needed to have 60 votes, you know, just to move it into past the debate stage and into a vote. So senators are supposed to be statesmen who are showing vision for our country in some form or fashion. Keeping mindful of the old traditions and not moving us ahead too quickly. At the same time, so tying us into our great heritage in governing, but also moving us ahead in ways that would be fitting for the greatest nation in the history of the world to move ahead.
All right, so you seem like your drive is connected to both the past and the future.
Absolutely. It really is. It really is, Tim, the absolute greatest country in the world.
I agree.
And it's our leadership, for generations has been of great consequence to the world, and our leadership continues to be of great consequence to the world. So yeah, it's where we've been. Of course, informs where we're going. Things change, and we have to figure out, what part of our principles, how our principles apply, the timeless principles of the past, how they apply to, what we're supposed to do in the future and with the changes of today. I mean, the founders never, thought about iPhones, or they never thought about Uber. They never thought about a lot of things, right? So it's obviously we're taking the principles that have been forever and applying them to the circumstances of today. So there we are.
What skills do you think you could bring to the Senate?
Well, I spent my entire life in the private sector. So I got out of law school, and I eventually went into the investment business. I helped build a worldwide company headquartered here in Massachusetts, which created a lot of jobs here in the state. So, I think you think about it in first instance. I know how enterprise works and how the private sector works. I know how we create jobs, and of course, forever, we've wanted senators to be people of commerce. I mean, of course, not everybody needs to be a person of commerce, but you want to know how things get achieved in the real world, how jobs get created, how the marketplaces work. So I'll bring that to the table. I think, probably the most consequential thing I'll bring to the table, though, is it's in my DNA to work to bring people together. I've been creating coalitions and alliances in the various communities, African American, Asian American, Latino American, my entire adult life, and working in those different veins to bring people together. I've been somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. I've created a dozen different not-for-profit or civic or other business initiatives to help address the problems of society. So, one, jobs creator, business person. Two, I've been working my entire life to bring people together. And three, I'm just solutions oriented. Work with people to bring them together across a spectrum of race and ethnicity and ideology, and then focus on the problem at hand and try to find a solution. So, imaginative ways to get to solutions. I think that's also part of that mix too.
What do you think are some of the greatest priorities for the country at this moment?
Well, I mentioned earlier that the Senate, the greatest deliberative body in the world, is not functioning the right way now. I don't think you'd speak to anybody, Democrat, Independent, or Republican, and I'm running as a Republican, who would say right now that Washington is functioning effectively. Things are just polarized and divided. It feels like our leaders are not bringing us together. It feels like they're taking us on paths of division and separation. So I think that the most important priority right now is just to get our country working the right way it ought to in our politics, right? We've got a good model for that in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, our wonderful governor, is doing a tremendous job with working with the the minorities on both the House and Senate side, which are Republican, and the majorities in the House and Senate side, which are Democrat. So he is figuring out a way to reach across the aisle, work with all sorts of people with all sorts of different agendas, and figuring out how to get to solutions. And those solutions are good for the citizens of Massachusetts. What's happening in Washington is that nobody's doing that. So it's dominated by extremists on both sides. There's plenty of blame to go around on that. So priority one is to bring an independent-minded, solutions-oriented approach to Washington, just like we're doing here in Massachusetts. Bring it there and help the Senate start to function effectively across party lines. That's objective number one. Priority two would be get people to do their jobs. I'm going to be running in part on the platform of, no budget, no pay for senators. No budget, you don't go home, right, for senators. I mean, so basically, people for too long have been failing to do their jobs, and just no one's, holding them accountable. We in Massachusetts, we love our sports. We love a can-do sensibility, and famously, Bill Belichick and the Patriots, have a do-your-job mantra, right? Every person on a team needs to do their job. The offensive lineman, the quarterback, the defensive back, the defensive line. Every single person, from the head coach, down to the water boy, needs to do their job. Right now, the folks in Washington are not doing their jobs, and that's why I'm motivated to run, to try to change that culture and try to change that ethos, to get people to do their jobs again. These aren't bad people, but they're not sticking with their knitting. They're not staying the course to make sure that their work gets done.
They're slacking off, basically.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Slacking off. Sometimes you just need to shake a system up, and I don't think they're poorly intentioned people. I mean, my opponent in this race, Senator Warren, she's a remarkable American success story. I mean, there's a lot to admire about her, and she was a very well-regarded law school professor. I was at Harvard Law School when she first came, and no matter what the ideology of the students might have been, they thought well of her. Something's going awry on that path. I don't think she's poorly intentioned, but something's going awry that now she's working in a vein of not trying to draw people together, not trying to get the job done. And I don't understand why, honestly, but somehow or other the system needs to be shaken up, and I'm intending to go to Washington to achieve that objective.
All right. What are your thoughts on the presidential administration, and how do you think Mr. Trump is doing in his first year?
Well, I'll tell you, there are some really, really good things to be happy about with the way things are going. Our generals, I'm so grateful for, the top shelf generals. We've got General Mattis, who we've worked with, General McMaster, General Kelly. Those guys are just the absolute, best, first-rate generals we've ever had. So I'm so pleased with the wisdom we're showing on that front. We've done a fine job. The administration's done a fine job in terms of advancing good judges. Justice Gorsuch, was a fine Supreme Court pick, and widely regarded by nearly everybody. I think regulatory rollback. I think it's this country is best when we regulate industries prudently, rather than over-regulate. And the administration's doing a fine job in a number of different areas. The energy sector, the financial sector, and others of pulling back on some of the regulations that had advanced just too far. And there'd been a lack of discipline in years past and increasing the number of regulations. So I got to give them credit for that.
All right. What are your thoughts on healthcare?
Wow. As I said, you're going for the big ball questions here. I admire that. So Tim, the problem with healthcare right now is that we tried to solve this back in 2010. When I said we, saying we're all in this as Americans, but that's not really fair because only one side tried to solve it unilaterally. The President Obama and the Obama administration advanced an agenda to pass a health care bill, the first time in U.S. history that a major social welfare legislation, a piece of major social welfare legislation, had been passed on a straight-up party vote, one-party vote. The greatest deliberative body in the world is supposed to deliberate, right? That's the way you're supposed to run. Famously, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, in order for us to know what's in the bill, we have to pass it. And so there's a 2,500-page bill, and it was clear that not due deliberation was given, both by the Speaker's comments and just the way the process unfolded. When you take on something which is, 20% of the economy, the healthcare sector is just so consequential to the economy broadly, but of course it's very consequential to people's lives, then we should pause as a people. We should have paused as a people in 2010 and gone slowly and said, what's the way that we come together as a people to apply time-honored principles, remember I talked about time-honored principles, to new situations. The new situation is that we have far greater variety of the populace in this country, great diversity, which is one of our greatest strengths, but makes it very hard to pass a social welfare legislation in Washington, which is going to apply to everybody in all the circumstances. The situation in New Orleans, Louisiana is a lot different than the situation here in Boston in terms of the people you're taking care of and providing health care for. That's a changing circumstance from what the founders were facing. Another changing circumstances is the life expectancy and how much health care we can continue to give on into people's later years. How life expectancy changes. These are all changing factors and circumstances. The dynamics of a remarkable and robust pharmaceuticals industry. We've got the best pharmaceuticals industry in the world. Yeah. All of these things are things that are really complicated to reckon with, right?
Yeah. Politics isn't easy.
I'm sorry?
Politics isn't easy.
You're exactly right. And instead, they went the easy way, and they just jammed a bill through, and it was voted into law. So, ever since, we've been trying to figure out what to do with the problem of healthcare regulation in this country in light of what's called Obamacare. And forever, Republicans ran on what they called the repeal and replace approach. However, once they actually got to Washington, many of them, and they had the opportunity, now that they've got a majority, to do something about that, they decided that repeal and replace wasn't what they actually wanted to do. But then whatever they are trying to do, they're trying to do it on a straight party vote again. It is obvious to Americans from the Republican side, independents, and the Democratic side that there are problems with this healthcare regulation. They have to be fixed. We have to work together to fix them. It's incumbent on us as Americans to do that. It's incumbent on our leaders to make that a reality. People have to come together in Washington and set their agendas aside and set their ideologies aside to a degree. Principled ideology is a good thing, but to a degree, just to say, well, what's going to make it work better for the American people? And that's not what's happening right now. And again, another reason why I want to go there, shake up the system, and make something different.
There just has to be a sort of cohesion between the two parties and all of government.
We all have to work together, right? You know, you learn that in which grade are you in, Timmy?
7th.
I mean, people in 7th grade know how you got to work together on the most basic of things, and your classroom assignments, and your, and your ball teams, whatever. You guys understand it, better than our leadership is understanding. People are doing the old take your ball and go home approach on this stuff, and it just doesn't work, and it's just not right. It does a disservice to all the American people.
Well, I've got another hardball question coming up.
Oh.
What are your thoughts on immigration and sanctuary cities?
That's another one where the very same issue arises of it's a complicated question. We've got a lot of people that came here illegally, and we know that we need to secure our borders sensibly. We need to figure out what to do with the people that are here, some of whom we want to stay because it seems reasonable and prudent to have them stay, some of whom we need to send back because they're not the right people to be here in the country, and to figure out an orderly way forward, basically what we're talking about here, right, is the concept of who do we want to be able to come into this wonderful country, right? We love this country. Our immigrants are our lifeblood in so many ways. We get the best people in the entire world. It's fantastic. But we need an orderly way to allow the right people to come on the right terms. And so both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, need to come together and bring their values to the table on this and figure out a way to come up with comprehensive immigration solutions. And what is not a comprehensive immigration solution is for an individual city or town to declare itself a sanctuary city. Can't do that. That's against the rule of law. It's going rogue against the rule of law. So
if voters want to find out more about you, is there a website or something that represents your campaign?
Yes, people can go to www.johnkingston.com. We're just coming off the most diverse political kickoff event in history. We brought an amazing room of people together: Democrats, Independents, Republicans, African Americans, Asian American, Latino Americans, people of European descent, all of whom know that there are problems that need to be solved, and we launched on that date, and you can hear more about what we're doing, where this cause and this campaign is going at that site.
Do you have any closing remarks or anything you'd like to add?
I just say, again, first of all, I'm honored to be here, and just to say that again, this is really fun.
Wanted to have you on the show.
This is a really good time. I love this country. Its best days are ahead of it. I love this state. The best days of Massachusetts are ahead of it. But right now, we're stuck in a state of paralysis in our governing, approach in Washington. It's not happening in the states. Massachusetts is running itself quite nicely, and I go to see Republican governors around the country. They're doing a magnificent job in their states. But in Washington, it's just not working. And part of the reason is that we're immersed in this age of division. And what we need is to move to an era of unity, and one which is going to help us heal the very, very, very real wounds that we have as a country. Wonderful possibility, wonderful opportunity. Still the greatest country in the world, no question about it. But for us to continue to unlock the promise of this country, we're going to have to bring our people together and work together.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be here.